Hi class, today I'm going to show you how to create a maze with OnShape. But you don't have to design your maze from scratch. You can use this tool right here, Maze Generator. It's at mazegenerator.net and it will create the maze design for you. So this is just the default setting. When I press generate, it will give me a maze that uses the parameters that I specified, and I can continue to generate more mazes and it'll continue to give me another random design that fits the criteria, the parameters that were specified up here. So for the sake of this tutorial, I am going to do a much smaller maze, but before that let me just show you it can do these other interesting shapes. This kind of reminds me of a little honeycomb, and then this is a triangle. It gives us some other designs, which is really cool, and it'll be extra credit if you can do those in OnShape. But for this assignment we're just going to do the simple squares, the orthogonal, and I am going to change these parameters just so it's a little bit easier for me to demonstrate it in OnShape. So I just want it to be an 8x8 for the sake of what we're doing. Okay, so I could export this as an image and try to trace it in OnShape, but that's actually quite tedious and it won't produce the best results for us. I really just need to see this design, so I'm actually going to do a little screenshot of it so that I can keep this around while I'm doing my OnShape. So I'm going to go back to the portal. I'm going to pull up OnShape, and you can use Google to sign in, but I'm going to create a new document. Create document. I am going to call this my maze demo. And then I'm going to use a feature that I taught you so that we can snap to a grid. So we're going to start with creating a sketch. It's going to be on the top plane, and I'm ready to draw, so I'm going to press N for normal, and then I'm going to press P to hide my planes. Okay, so my maze was a 8x8 grid. So I'm going to actually need 9 dots to cover 8 squares. So I'm going to create a point in space, and then I'm going to repeat that point with a linear pattern, but I need it to go across 9 and up 9. And the width is going to be the width of a ball bearing, the little ball that we're going to put inside this maze. And so for now, let's just make it 5 millimeters, which is half a centimeter, which is about 1/5 of an inch. And I'll change it on both sides. Okay, the other thing we're going to set is I want this centered around the origin right here. So I'm actually done with the grid, but all the dots are blue because it's not fully defined. But I can change that by telling it to center on the origin. So I'm going to go to my coincident constraint, and I'm going to find the middle point of my SnapGrid, and I want it to be coincident with the origin. And now all my dots, oh, actually that's not the middle point. Let me try again. So I want coincidence with the origin, and I think that's my middle dot. Okay, that looks more like it. Okay, so this is just my SnapGrid where I'm ready to make my maze. So let's split the screen so y'all can see what the maze design looks like. Okay, so here's OnShape, and that's the maze that I'm trying to build. Okay, so I'm just going to use my lines just like I did when I built my Soma cubes, and I am going to snap everything to the design of this maze. Okay, and so I do want to wait until I see the little coincidence icon. It implies that I'm going to start my line on these dots. 1, 2, 3. Okay, this next line goes across 4, and then it skips, and then goes across 3. Okay, and then the right side is the entire side, so I'm going to snap to those lines. This one goes across 4, and then it comes across 3. And you might think, well, don't these walls need some thickness? They do, and we're going to deal with that in a second. But we're just going to go and trace exactly what I see in my maze design so that I didn't have to design that maze myself. Somebody else thought through all the complexities of designing a maze, and all those details are created for me. And the cool thing is that maze generator is free. So there's people who just enjoy programming, and when they create stuff they just like to share it with other people, and that maze generator is one of those things. In the software industry, that's called open source, when people just like programming for the sake of programming, and they like to share with others. And that's one of the ways that we innovate, is we don't wait to try to make money off of our creations. We just enjoy creating, and the best way to get our creations out there is just to offer it for free. Okay, so that is my maze, but there's really nothing to extrude because this is not a closed shape. You see how nothing got shaded, nothing got closed, so nothing is closed, so I can't really extrude this. But if I use this feature called a slot, and let me see if I can find it. If I use this feature called a slot, and I highlight all of this, ooh, that's way too thick because the radius is 20, but my maze is 5 millimeters apart, and if I change this radius to be a radius of 1 millimeter, now that creates the thickness of the walls, and that is shaded area, so that shaded area has the ability to be extruded. And look how nice these rounded corners are, because this is what we call a slot. Okay, so I have a 5 millimeter by 5 millimeter tall maze walls, so I'm going to extrude it down. Let's actually extrude it down 4 millimeters, because since our walls are 1 millimeter, the inside diameter is actually just 4. Okay, and then when I press Shift 7, there is my maze. And it is in 2 separate parts because this part doesn't touch this part, but we can now make a floor for our wall, and that will allow us to actually join it back into one piece. So let's try that next. Let me turn on my top plane real quick so I can see where that is. Okay, so the top plane is at the bottom of this maze, which means if I create the floor of my wall on that top plane, then it'll close up this maze. So I want another sketch, which is going to be the floor of my wall. It is going to be on that top plane. And I'm going to switch to the bottom view, because what I want to do is I want the corners of this to align with the sides of this, this maze. So I'm going to use this other tool called Use, also called Project or Convert. And this is going to project the lines from my original sketch onto this new sketch. So when I click Use, I can highlight this curved corner. And now that curved corner is on this sketch. And I do know I want to use this line and this line. Okay. Let's also use that corner and this line. This corner, this line, one more corner to go. Okay, right there and right there. Okay, so just for the sake of seeing what I just did, I am going to suppress my extrude and hide this sketch, and I can see these are the lines that I just created. And if I want to close up that line here, I can, and then if I close up the bottom, now I have a closed shape which I can extrude, which is exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to unsuppress here, and that sketch is basically the bottom of my maze. I want to extrude, but I don't want to extrude in this direction. I want to extrude in the opposite direction. So I'm going to click this little arrow that says opposite direction, and it's going to extrude that way. And I only need it to be the floor, so I'm going to change it to be 1 millimeter thick. Okay, and when I clicked the confirm on the extrude to, I now have a floor. But it's treating it as 3 different pieces, which is not how I want to print it out. So I'm going to bring up the extrude dialog again, and instead of new, I'm going to change it to add. And just in case, because it doesn't know what to add to, there's already 2 existing pieces, so I'm going to say merge all, and it's just going to merge with everything that it touches. So now there's 1 maze, and it's just 1 part. So the last thing I'm going to do is I actually want this to be one of those little mazes that I can put a top on. So for me to do that, I actually don't want this opening here. I want a hole in the bottom. So for me to do that, I'm going to change my original sketch, and I am going to add another line, and I'm going to change that to a slot. And then over here, I'm going to add another line. Oops, hold on. Okay. And I'm going to change that to a slot as well. Okay, let's make sure we didn't mess up anything. Oops, okay, it messed up some things because now it sees a closed shape, so let's try again. Okay, let's do that in another exercise, but the last thing I want to show you is you do need to put, if you're going to make this into a closed maze, you do need to put a hole somewhere in here. And let's just practice by putting a hole in the corner. So for me to know how to center my hole, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn sketch 1 back on, because I want to know where the center of this square is. So I am going to create a new sketch on the top plane. But in this new sketch, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create construction lines. And construction lines just help me place parts, but it's not an actual line that can be extruded. So I'm going to place an X from there to there, and then another X from this dot to this dot. What that does is it tells me where the center of that square is. Okay, so now the actual thing I want to draw is a center point circle. And this isn't a construction because I want to use this to make my hole. So let's go to that center point circle. I want it to be centered on both of these lines. So let me see if I can get it there. Okay, I click to place the center, and then I click to create the hole, and 1.55 isn't quite big enough. I want it to be almost 2, but let's try 1.75. That's still not big enough. Let's see if I can change that. Maybe I really want 2.5. Oh, that's the diameter, so I probably do want it to be close to like 3.75. Okay, so that's my circle on sketch 3. I'm going to do something different here. I'm actually going to extrude, but I'm going to extrude and remove. And this will actually create the hole on this corner of my maze. And when I click the check mark, now I have a maze with a hole in the corner. So that will create what I want to put on top of a game that will put a hole in the middle.